That message popped up just as I was locking my office door. Your father left everything to Mark. I blinked, fingers still on my phone. The words hit quietly like a whisper in a noisy room. Around me, the office buzzed with usual chatter, keyboards clicking, phones ringing. Nobody noticed. I didn't panic. Just folded the phone away, took a deep breath, and went back to work. It wasn't the first surprise life had thrown at me, and somehow I knew this wouldn't be the last. By the way, before we dive in, tell me in the comments, ever seen someone get the revenge they really deserved? I read all of them. Hey, while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's continue. My name's Anna. I'm 38 now, working as a project manager at a mid-sized design firm in the city. Life's never been simple, but I've always kept my feet on the ground. After my divorce 5 years ago, I stayed focused on my career and raising my son, Liam. He's 8, full of energy and questions I don't always have the answers to. But that's okay. I managed. When the message about my father's legacy came, it wasn't completely out of the blue. There had been little signs, subtle things I brushed off at first, like the way Dad stopped returning my calls last year. Just silence, then vague excuses if I happened to catch him. Or the times my ex-husband, Mark, suddenly seemed unusually close to Dad, long conversations I wasn't part of, invitations I wasn't included in. The kind of things you notice only when you're already wary. I remember the last time I spoke to Dad directly, months before the message. He sounded tired, distracted. Anna, you're doing well, that's what matters, he said quickly, almost like he wanted to end the call before I could ask more. I thought it was just old age catching up, nothing more. But then, after the message, I started paying attention in a different way, quietly, without making a scene. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions, not without proof. One afternoon, I met with my friend and lawyer, Sarah, at a small cafe near my office. She's sharp, straightforward, and one of the few people I trusted with what I was beginning to suspect. I don't want to make this bigger than it is, I said, stirring my tea. But it feels off. Dad never said anything about changing his will, not directly, and Mark, he's been acting strange too. Like he's hiding something. Sarah nodded, folding her hands. You're right to be cautious. These family things get messy fast. What do you want to find out? That he didn't do this behind my back, I replied softly. That if something's changed, I know exactly why. We agreed to start quietly, requesting copies of any recent legal documents related to Dad's estate, looking into his finances, and gathering whatever proof was available. No confrontations yet, just gathering facts. Back at work, the office felt different now. Every small interaction carried weight. When a colleague mentioned casually, Mark's been visiting Dad a lot lately, it wasn't just idle talk anymore. I thanked them with a smile but made a mental note. At home, Liam noticed my distracted mood but didn't press. Kids have their own way of knowing without words. One evening, as I sat sorting through bills and emails, he climbed onto my lap, eyes wide. Mom, are you okay? I hugged him close. I'm fine, sweetheart, just working on some stuff. He didn't ask more, but I could see the worry in his little face. In those weeks, I kept the outside calm. I met with Sarah again, sharing new bits of information, a suspicious bank statement here, an unexpected legal letter there. Anna, Sarah said one afternoon, reviewing a file, this looks serious. If your father really changed his will in favor of Mark, and it's legally binding, you might have grounds to contest it. But it'll take time and evidence. I nodded, feeling a quiet resolve settle inside me. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about fairness, about respect, about setting things right for Liam and for myself. At work, I threw myself into projects, my mind sharper, more focused than ever. I didn't tell anyone the full story, only a close few. They offered words of encouragement, quiet smiles, and a sense of solidarity I hadn't realized I needed. One day, my assistant, Julia, noticed the change. You're different, Anna, stronger somehow. I smiled, grateful for the observation. Maybe I just learned to keep my cards closer. As the pieces slowly came together, I found a strange peace in the preparation. The quiet gathering of strength while the world around me stayed unaware. The future wasn't certain, but I was ready to meet it head-on. Because sometimes the most powerful moves happen silently, behind closed doors. The day it all officially hit me arrived like any other, quiet, ordinary, nothing that screamed disaster. I was at the office, reviewing a project timeline when my phone buzzed. The screen showed Mark's name. My heart didn't race, I answered calmly. Anna, he said, his voice clipped, almost cold. We need to talk. Sure, I said, setting my pen down. What's going on? There was a pause, then the words hit like a stone sinking fast. I'm done, Anna. I'm leaving everything, Dad, the business, I'm done. For a moment I just listened, letting the silence fill the space between us. Then I said, is this about the will, the legacy? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he muttered something about moving on and starting fresh. I realized then this wasn't just about money, it was a clean break, a final cut. I ended the call, my expression unreadable to the few colleagues glancing my way. I packed up my things slowly, no rush, no panic. The office felt unusually quiet, even the usual hum of printers and typing seemed distant. Julia, my assistant, caught my eye as I walked out. Everything okay? She asked quietly. Fine, I said, forcing a small smile, just some family stuff. At home, Liam was waiting for me, his small face bright with the excitement of his school day. He didn't notice the weight I carried, and I was glad for that. Mom, look what I drew, he said, holding up a colorful scribble. It's us. I knelt beside him, taking the paper gently. It's beautiful, Liam. I wanted to tell him everything, to share the bitter truth, but I couldn't. Not yet. That night, Mark's words echoed in my mind. The calm in my voice was a mask. Inside, a quiet storm brewed. But I didn't let it show. The next morning, I met with Sarah again. They've cut me off, I said simply. No contact, no explanations. Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. It's a tactic. Isolation makes you doubt yourself weaker. I'm not weak, I replied firmly, but I need to be smart. Together, we started drafting a plan. Divorce papers, legal challenges to the will, gathering witnesses who could support Dad's original intentions. My world was shrinking, focused only on what mattered, truth and justice. At work, things changed too. Mark's shadow was everywhere, in whispered conversations, sideways glances, the occasional awkward silence when his name came up. One day, a colleague I barely knew approached me. Anna, she said softly, I heard about what Mark did, I'm sorry. I nodded, appreciating the kindness but keeping my distance. Sympathy wasn't what I needed, strength was. One afternoon, I found myself staring out the office window. The city stretched endlessly, full of people with their own struggles and victories. Somewhere in that vastness, I was carving a new path, not just for me, but for Liam. A phone call interrupted my thoughts, this time from Dad's lawyer. The voice on the other end was gentle but serious. Anna, your father's health isn't good, we need to meet soon. I felt the weight of the moment but stayed composed. Thank you. I'll come by tomorrow. Before hanging up, I glanced at my reflection in the darkened screen of my phone. Calm eyes stared back. This was only the beginning. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, papers spread before me, legal documents, financial statements, notes from conversations. Liam did his homework nearby, humming softly. I reached out, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. We're going to be okay, I whispered, more to myself than to him, because even in the face of betrayal, I wasn't broken. I was building something stronger, quietly, deliberately, and with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The shock wasn't in the loss. It was in knowing I was about to rise from it. After the phone call with Dad's lawyer, the air seemed heavier, though life kept moving as usual around me. But inside, I was starting to assemble the pieces, the truth, the proof, the plan that would take me from quiet suspicion to solid ground. The next morning, I met Sarah again, this time at her law office, a small room filled with thick books and the faint smell of coffee. She had already started digging into Dad's legal affairs. I found copies of the will, she said, sliding a file across the desk. There are 2 versions, one from 5 years ago and another signed last month. I took the papers carefully, feeling the weight of every line. The older will left everything evenly divided between my father's children, me, my brother, and my son's future trust. The new one left almost everything to Mark. That's not just a change, I said quietly. It's a complete rewrite. Sarah nodded. Exactly, and the timing is suspicious. We need to verify Dad's mental capacity when he signed the new will. Was he fully aware, or was someone influencing him? That question hung in the room like a shadow. Who else knew? Who else was involved? Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. We'll need to collect more evidence. Bank statements, communications, anything that shows manipulation or undue influence. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a new sense of purpose. Back home, I started piecing together what I had, emails between Dad and Mark, some messages where Dad sounded confused, even a few notes from family gatherings where Mark seemed unusually controlling. One evening, I sat at the dining table, the soft hum of the city outside my window keeping me company. Liam was asleep, and for once the silence felt like an ally. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "If you want the truth, meet me at the park near your office tomorrow, noon." My heart skipped, but I didn't hesitate. I replied, "I'll be there." The next day I arrived early, scanning the quiet park as the clock neared noon. A man in his late 40s approached, cautious but determined. "Anna?" he asked, voice low. I nodded. "I used to work for your father's business," he said. "I saw things you don't know. Mark's been moving money around behind the scenes. Dad didn't want this, but he was pressured." I listened carefully as he laid out the details: offshore accounts, altered contracts, even forged signatures. Every word was a thread, pulling me closer to a tangled web I hadn't dared imagine. After he left, I called Sarah immediately. "I have a witness," I said, "someone with inside knowledge." Sarah's voice was steady. "Good, we'll verify everything and prepare to present this in court, but Anna, you have to be ready for pushback. This won't be easy." "I'm ready," I said, more confident than I'd felt in months. In the weeks that followed, I met frequently with Sarah and a financial expert she recommended. Together, we organized the evidence: recordings, bank statements, emails, and the witness's testimony. Each piece strengthened the case, turning vague suspicions into a clear story of manipulation and betrayal. At work, I started noticing changes too. Mark's influence in the family business was fading. Rumors circulated that he was struggling to maintain control. Colleagues whispered about possible legal battles, but no one dared say it aloud. One afternoon, Julia brought me a file marked urgent. "This came from your father's accountant," she said, eyes curious. "They want to meet." I arranged the meeting quickly. The accountant, a woman in her 50s with a steady gaze, handed me documents outlining financial irregularities: missing funds, unauthorized transactions, suspicious payments. "We believe these are tied to Mark's activities," she said. "But we need formal action to proceed." That's when I realized how much I had in my hands: a network of facts, witnesses, and experts all ready to back me up. But it also made me aware of the risks. Mark wouldn't back down easily. One evening, as I worked late in the quiet office, Sarah called. "Anna, I'm drafting the initial lawsuit documents. We'll file them early next week." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle. The path ahead was clear, but the climb was steep. Before hanging up, Sarah said, "You've done more than most would. Stay steady." "I will," I promised. After the call, I looked around the empty room, feeling the calm after the storm. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was a battle for justice, for dignity, for the future I was quietly building all along. That night, as Liam slept soundly, I stayed up, writing down every step, every plan. The road was long, but I was no longer afraid. I had the truth, I had my resolve, and soon I would have my chance. The day of the confrontation arrived quietly, like a storm rolling in without warning. The courthouse wasn't a place I'd ever imagined myself standing in, but there I was, calm, collected, prepared. Years of silent preparation had led to this moment. My lawyer Sarah and I arrived early. The waiting room buzzed softly with murmurs from other cases, but all I heard was the steady beat of my own heartbeat. Mark was there too, flanked by his lawyer, eyes scanning the room like he was already counting his victory. When my name was called, I stood and walked toward the courtroom. The judge's gaze was sharp but fair. I met Mark's eyes across the room. There was no surprise there, only a flicker of something like regret, quickly masked by arrogance. The session began with Sarah presenting the evidence. The older will, the suspicious new document, bank statements, expert testimony about Dad's mental state, the insider witness's account. Piece by piece, the story unfolded with clarity. Mark's lawyer tried to dismiss it as hearsay, manipulation by jealous family members, and exaggerations. But Sarah was ready. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "the evidence shows a clear pattern of undue influence and financial manipulation. My client's father was vulnerable, and the defendant exploited that vulnerability." Mark's eyes flicked to me, a challenge unspoken. I met it without flinching. When it was my turn, I spoke calmly, each word measured. "I loved my father," I said softly. "I trusted him, but I also respect him enough to fight for the truth. This isn't just about money, it's about what's right." The courtroom fell silent. Mark shifted in his seat, his face tightening. The judge asked questions, probing details, weighing every argument carefully. It felt like time stretched, every moment charged with tension. After hours of testimony and arguments, the judge adjourned the session, promising to deliver a ruling soon. Outside the courthouse, the world seemed different, more real, more fragile. I met Sarah by the steps. "You did well," she said, handing me a bottle of water. "Thanks," I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. "What now?" "We wait. But this first step is crucial. You've shown strength, clarity. Mark won't expect you to hold your ground so firmly." Days passed like a slow tide. At work, life carried on. Yet every phone call, every glance, carried undercurrents of the battle unfolding just beneath the surface. Then came a surprise visit. I was at the office late one evening when the door opened quietly. Mark stood there, hesitating, the usual confidence replaced by something else, uncertainty, maybe even desperation. "Anna," he said, voice low, "can we talk?" I studied him carefully, sensing the shift. "About the lawsuit." He nodded. "Yes, I didn't expect you to fight back like this." "I'm not here to fight," I said quietly. "I'm here for the truth." He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "I never wanted it to come to this." Dad was confused, but I thought maybe I was doing what's best. "Did you ask him," I challenged, "or did you decide for him?" His silence answered. "I'm building a future," I said, "not tearing down the past. You should consider that." He glanced at the papers on my desk, the evidence we'd gathered. "Maybe I underestimated you." "Maybe you did." He left without another word. That night I sat alone, reflecting on the encounter. It wasn't a surrender, it was a crack in his armor. And sometimes, that's all it takes. The court ruling came weeks later. The judge acknowledged the evidence of undue influence and suspended the new will's validity until a full investigation. Mark's control over the estate was temporarily revoked. I didn't celebrate loudly. I just breathed deeply, feeling the weight lift little by little. At work the next day, Julia smiled at me knowingly. "Looks like you're winning." I smiled back, but inside I was already thinking ahead. This was far from over, but I was no longer the quiet bystander. I was the one steering the ship now. The judge's decision felt like a quiet victory, a pause in the battle, a chance to breathe and act with clearer focus. The new will was suspended, and Mark's grip on my father's estate was loosened. But it wasn't just about the legal win. It was the first real step toward reclaiming my future, and more importantly, my dignity. Back at the office, the atmosphere subtly shifted. I was no longer just the project manager or the quiet woman who kept her head down. People looked at me differently now, some with surprise, others with respect. It was as if the news had traveled quietly, like a secret that suddenly changed how everyone saw me. Julia handed me a folder one morning, her smile a little brighter than usual. "The contract with the new client they want to sign with us, it's a big one." I raised an eyebrow, almost surprised. "That's unexpected. Usually these deals take months." She shrugged, words getting around. "You've been handling everything like a pro, even under pressure." It was small, but it mattered. That tiny acknowledgement from a colleague was a balm on the bruises left by months of hidden struggles. Meanwhile, Sarah and I met frequently, updating lawsuit filings, preparing for the next phases of the investigation. Each step brought more clarity. Financial audits revealed layers of discrepancies, potential fraud that even Mark hadn't fully covered up. One afternoon, Sarah leaned over the documents with a thoughtful look, tapping her pen on the table. "If this continues as planned, the court might rule fully in your favor. But patience is key. Mark's not done fighting." "I know," I said, the quiet determination steady in my voice. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." At home, Liam noticed the changes too. One evening, as I helped him with his homework, he looked up with wide, curious eyes. "Mom, you're working really hard. Are you okay?" I smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm making sure we have a good future." He nodded, his face serious for a moment, then went back to his math problems. It struck me how much he was growing up, how much he was watching me, learning in his own way. The days blurred into weeks. I balanced meetings, court dates, and late nights at the office with bedtime stories and weekend park visits with Liam. It wasn't easy. Exhaustion crept in at times, but I kept reminding myself why I was doing it for him and for the life I wanted to build. Then came another unexpected turn, a call from my father's old business partners. They wanted to meet and discuss restructuring the company to protect it from Mark's influence and secure its future. The meeting was tense but hopeful. These were people who had known Dad for years, and now they saw me stepping up, not just as a daughter but as someone capable of leading. I felt their unspoken doubts but also a growing respect. "We need stability," one partner said, his voice steady. "You've shown strength when it mattered. We want you involved in the decision-making moving forward." I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself before: hope. A quiet flame kindling inside. Soon after, I began taking small steps toward rebuilding the business. I met with consultants, reviewed contracts, and slowly started crafting a new vision, one that reflected resilience, transparency, and a future I wanted to create on my own terms. Mark's attempts to undermine me grew weaker as news of the legal actions and restructuring spread. Rumors circulated that he was applying for jobs, humble positions far from the family empire. It was a quiet fall from the pedestal he once stood on. One afternoon, I ran into him unexpectedly at a local cafe. He looked different, tired, almost defeated. His usual arrogance was replaced by something more vulnerable. He hesitated, then said, "Anna, I heard you're taking over." I nodded, my gaze steady. "I'm building something new." He gave a small, resigned smile. "I guess you always were the stronger one." I didn't reply. Instead, I walked away, feeling the final threads of the past unraveling behind me. At home, I shared the news with Liam. His eyes lit up with pride. "Mom, you're like a superhero." I laughed softly, wrapping him in a warm hug. Maybe just a mom who never gives up. That night, as I closed my laptop and looked around our small apartment, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet confidence, a sense of peace. The battle wasn't over, but I was winning. Slowly, surely. And for the first time in years, I could see a future not shadowed by betrayal, but illuminated by hope. The ripples from the court's decision began to spread quietly but powerfully, shaking the foundations of Mark's world. What once seemed so secure for him started to crumble piece by piece. I heard through trusted colleagues and old family friends that Mark had lost more than just control over Dad's estate. His reputation within our social circles and business networks was taking a serious hit. At the firm, whispers floated like cautious currents. "Did you hear Mark's been rejected from every job he's applied for? Not even entry-level positions are giving him a chance," Julia said one morning, her voice a mix of disbelief and sympathy. The man who once walked in with a commanding presence was now reduced to a desperate figure, scrambling for stability. But I felt no rush to gloat or celebrate. The fall of someone else was never the source of my strength. Instead, I observed silently as Mark's isolation grew. Family members who had once sided with him began pulling away. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unanswered. It was as if the confident man who had once shaped the narrative around Dad's legacy had vanished, replaced by a shadow weighed down by regret and failure. Still, I didn't let the bitterness consume me. There was a quiet dignity in watching justice unfold without haste or drama. Meanwhile, my own life was blossoming in ways I hadn't fully allowed myself to imagine. The business was no longer just my father's legacy. It was evolving into something I could truly call my own. Partners who had been hesitant before now reached out with open hands, eager to support and collaborate. They recognized in me a leader, steady, capable, and prepared. One afternoon, a meeting with financial advisors revealed a surprising truth. Despite the chaos and deceit, the firm had untapped potential assets and opportunities lying dormant, waiting for the right hands to nurture them. I began crafting strategies, blending innovation with respect for the foundation Dad had laid. It was a delicate balance, but one I embraced. At home, Liam's pride was a constant light. One evening, as he proudly presented a drawing of a towering building emblazoned with our family's initials, he looked up and said, "Mom, we're going to make it big, right?" I smiled, my heart full, and hugged him close. "Yes, baby. We are." The people who had stayed quietly in the background, friends, distant relatives, started coming forward, offering support and sometimes quiet apologies for doubting me. It was bittersweet, a reminder of how fragile trust can be but also how resilient it is when nurtured. Through every step, I kept a small, close circle: Sarah, Julia, and a handful of loyal colleagues. Their unwavering support was a lifeline amid the chaos. With their help, I navigated complex contracts, court proceedings, and the daily challenge of balancing work and motherhood. Then came the call from Sarah that felt like the culmination of everything I'd fought for. "Anna, the court has just approved your request for full control of the estate, pending the final hearings. This is a major victory." I leaned back, the weight of months of struggle settling around me like a soft cloak. "Finally," I whispered, a mixture of relief and resolve in my voice. The legal battle wasn't fully over, but the tides had shifted decisively. I felt a profound calm, an assurance that the future I'd been quietly building was now firmly within reach. Looking back, it wasn't just about reclaiming what was taken. It was about breaking free from the past's shadows and stepping fully into the light of my own making, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. The day I finally stepped into my new office, officially in charge, the sunlight streamed through the large windows like a quiet promise. The space was modest but full of possibilities, a fresh canvas after years of shadows and uncertainty. I looked out at the city skyline, feeling something inside me settle into place. Liam was with me that morning, bouncing with excitement. "Mom, you're the boss now, that's so cool." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Yeah, kiddo. We did it." It wasn't just a victory in court or a business takeover, it was a new beginning. For years, I'd quietly built my future, step by step, never letting the past define me. Now I was free to live the life I wanted on my own terms. The journey had been long and sometimes lonely. There were moments when the weight of betrayal and loss felt unbearable. But those moments had shaped me, made me stronger, sharper. I learned to trust my instincts, to stay calm when everything seemed to unravel. One afternoon, I sat with Sarah over coffee. "You know," I said, stirring my cup, "I never thought I'd be here, not like this." Sarah smiled. "You were always here, you just had to believe it." I nodded, thinking of the quiet nights, the countless hours poring over documents, the small victories that no one saw but me. I learned that strength isn't loud, it's steady. It's knowing when to wait, when to act. At home, Liam's laughter filled the rooms, a reminder of what truly mattered. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving. Friends and family who had stood by me celebrated the changes, but I kept the focus on what was next. New projects, new challenges, and the freedom to dream again. One evening, as I tucked Liam into bed, he looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mom, what's the next big thing?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "The next big thing is making sure we're happy together. As the years unfold, I know there will be new struggles, but now I face them with quiet confidence. I've learned that life's hardest battles teach us the most, about resilience, wisdom, and the power of self-belief. Mark's chapter in my life is closed, but mine is just beginning, and it's a story I'm proud to write.